Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to talk to you about practicing and improving your art. In a recent video I posted, I talked about 3 tips that will help you to improve your art. The first of those tips was practice makes perfect, or fact that you should practice every day to improve. Now, I watched a recent lecture on this idea of practice makes perfect, and there's this interesting point that I want to make out. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes improvement. You should go in to practice to improve every single time. You're never going to be perfect at something, but you can always improve at it. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I practice and what I try to look for so that I can improve my skill as an artist. Let's get into it. I start out by looking at some references on Pinterest, just some poses that I think are pretty neat. And I like to do a few scribbles to make sure that my pen's working well and to just kind of get my arm loosened and ready to start drawing. So I start out by taking a few measurements of this piece, of this pose, to see how tall it is. A lot of really good artists will reference something and then find ways to measure things to make sure that proportions are accurate. And that's really important to do, especially with characters or realism and actual people drawings. You want to make sure the legs are long enough compared to the torso, that the head is small enough compared to the rest of the body, and so on. So you'll see that I start with the head and I sketch out the rest of the body, and I'm constantly doing lines to make sure that my angles and my shapes are all correct. But I start out with a really rough base at the beginning. Once I am more confident with how the shapes are doing well together, I start erasing some of the lines and then started to get into some more of the details. Now, I'm not super great at doing clothes, but I have seen tips and tricks on Pinterest and other social media platforms that give some suggestions. And this is just sketching, this is just practicing, so I could try them out here and see how well they work and find out whether it works for me or not. I think in this case it does. Once I've got the body laid out, I move on to the head, and that's when I zoom in. Make sure I stayed pretty zoomed out while I'm doing the initial sketch, so I don't focus too much on any one area. But then once I get to the head and the face, then I start focusing more on some of the details. Then I erase and refine everything as I go. Alright, and then I just make a few more adjustments, make sure some more proportions are correct, and refining. It is okay to erase and kind of redraw, and also utilizing your tools. But here, I need to fix the shoulder a little bit, I need to fix the leg and the upper thigh a little bit. So it's okay to just go in and make tweaks and erase. Just try not to get in the habit of erasing everything you do and starting over all the time. You need to keep going at some point. So here's my first sketch. I thought it was pretty good. And now I am moving on to the next sketch. So I find another pose that I would like to draw from Pinterest, and this time I just try and go for it. I have been an illustrator for a few years now, so I feel pretty comfortable just sort of blocking in shapes as I go instead of having to measure everything all the time. That doesn't mean I don't measure things. I've just gotten more comfortable either eyeballing it or not having to go in and measure. But I do highly recommend, when you're still pretty new at drawing, or if you're struggling a lot with proportions, start by taking somewhat or pretty thorough measurements of your reference. Figure out how big the head is compared to the rest of the body, and how long are the arms supposed to be, how big are the fists compared to the head, and really focus on proportions. And here you'll even see I really kind of have a hard time getting the head just the right way that I want it, and I end up erasing it a few times. So this is me practicing because I want to try to get it as close as possible. A lot of my stuff is somewhat stylized too, so I'm not super realism, but the way I do my lines and things like that, my sketch can really kind of show through his muscles, the proper proportions of his body, the genes and how they bend and fold and things like that. Even though the face might not be perfect, it is just a sketch after all. So I found another image. This time I wanted to do a larger or chunkier body type, just so I can get practice doing other things. If you always draw muscular figures, then you might not feel as comfortable doing larger, not as muscular characters. So I wanted to really emphasize the large, round shapes this time. So I'm actually even exaggerating the body a little bit more, especially in the face, and figuring out how I want this to look. You don't have to use a reference and copy it exactly every time. It's really good practice as an artist to take a reference and use it whenever you're doing like a character or just even a pose that you don't quite know how to do. You can take a reference who's in a similar pose and just kind of pull from it. I did actually end up thinning out his face a little bit because I am trying to match it somewhat. And there we go. Here's 3 sketches that I did today and how I went about it. When you're an artist, I would suggest really focusing on proportions at first, as well as shapes. Look out for what shapes the bodies make, and also the negative space and the shapes that they make there to help you really nail down the proportions when you're practicing. When you're doing sketching, when you're practicing art, even with colors and other design aspects and even landscapes, it's really important to think about the fundamentals of art and design, and that's something I will talk about in another video coming later. So be sure to subscribe and watch out for those. I'm going to be posting every Monday these art tips videos, and then I'll also have some other cool videos throughout the week and throughout the month of some projects that I'm working on and some other things. So thank you all so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and until next time, farewell.